Medieval knights poured fortunes into plate armor, convinced they'd bought near-invulnerability mobile fortresses with plumes. Then a simple, savage counter-argument arrived in iron and ash wood, the warhammer. It didn't need to slice, it only needed to move energy. One clean swing and the most expensive helmet on Earth behaved like a dinner bell and sometimes like a coffin lid. Armor makers kept polishing, hammermen kept aiming, physics picked its favorite. In this sixth installment, we crack open 10 battlefield truths behind two of the most feared weapons of the late Middle Ages, the warhammer and the chain flail. You'll see why concentrated impact turned chivalry into scrap metal, why the flail's chaos terrified even the men wielding it, and how both tools exposed the limits of class, training, and technology. From Agincourt's mud to peasant risings and Hussite wagon forts, these are the elegant, ugly equations that decided who got up and who stayed down. Ready? Mind your fingers, and seriously, mind your skull. The warhammer was born to answer a specific problem. How do you hurt a man you can't cut? Swords skated and glanced on late medieval plate, their edges defeated by curvature, hardness, and clever heat treatment. A hammer ignored all that flourish and asked a simpler question. If you can't get through metal, what happens if you make the metal get through you? Its face flat, ridged, or slightly domed concentrated force into a small footprint, turning the mass of the head and the speed of the arc into a micro-earthquake on contact. That impact didn't have to pierce to be lethal. Helmets are shells, and skulls are shells inside shells. When the outer one dimples, the inner one sloshes. A solid crown hit could buckle a visor, crack rivet lines, and ring a man's ears so hard his knees forgot the script. Even where the plate held, energy still had to go somewhere. It went into the cervical spine, the jaw hinge, the gel of the brain. It's the physics of a car crash performed at arm's length. Add in the leverage of a long haft and the ability to hook and wrench with beak or spike, and you have a tool that ignored status and bit straight into human anatomy's least negotiable weaknesses. For smiths, the beauty was modularity. Heads could be compact for one-handed use on horseback, or great and blocky for two-handed work on foot. Faces could be fluted to bite, peened to grip, or subtly curved to slide after biting. Haft lengths let you choose your conversation, close in, clinch and rip in a scrum, or long-armed bench press against a charging knight's head. The message beneath all those variants stayed the same. Mass times speed divided by area equals bad day. Nothing bruised aristocratic confidence like the sound of a hammer finding a helmet, not the musical clang of blade on plate, but the nauseating crack thud of tempered steel dimpling over a human head. Knights began the day as tanks. Hammers made them dinner bells. Worse, armor that once felt like a shell of protection could, after a good hit, feel like a trap-buckled visor jamming shut, gorget biting the throat, dented breastplate shortening breath. That's why veterans called harness a personal coffin when the wrong opponent lined up. Down in the mud, a fallen knight with a warped gorget and ringing skull becomes a man inside a rattle, heavy, slow blind. The same curves that shed arrows now trapped water and muck. The same hinges that gave miracles of mobility could, distorted, pinch nerves, or lock at the worst angle. On a clean field, a squire might pry you free. In a scrum, the only thing prying is a stranger's beaked hammer exploring the seam at your visor. Psychology did the rest. The first time a proud man hears his own helm pop under a blow, he learns a new respect for leverage. Whole formations felt it. A line takes one confident step forward, then a hammer rings, a champion drops to a knee, and momentum cools. Armor kept improving proofing marks, better tempering, fluting for stiffness, but the math never left. A well-placed, high-impulse strike could make fine metal behave like foil on bone. Many warhammers were Janus-faced. On one side, a hammer face to crush. On the other, a pick or beak to punch. The hammer side collapsed plates, broke fingers through gauntlets, and turned Polearms into instruments of prayer. Flip your grip, or reverse your swing, and the pick went to work, searching for the soft logic of gaps. Armpit, groin, visor slit, the thin plates over the foot, the mail at the elbow. Where a mace smears, the beak sows. That duality gave choices mid-swing. If a helmet presented broad and clean, flatten it. If an opponent half-turned, exposing the slope behind the ear, angle the beak and let gravity finish the sentence. The spike's geometry did more than pierce, it levered. A clean lodgment in a pauldron or corselet gave you a handle on a man's entire torso. Snap down, drag forward, and even a champion kisses dirt. Once he's down, the beak works like a tin opener, where the human machine is jointed and thin. The haft joined the argument. Shorthand warhammers lived in the clinch, darting and jabbing like cruel pistons. Long-hafted polehammers turned infantry into equalizers, outranging sword and battle-axe, while keeping enough point control to hunt for seams. Hooks under the head added mischief. Yank a shield down, snag a rein strap, interrupt a draw. Weapons that decide fights rarely do one thing well. The best do two ugly things flawlessly. Agincourt is the lecture hall where all these principles took attendance. French men-at-arms, magnificent in plate, funneled into churned clay between woods, their ranks compressed by terrain and a rain-soaked week. English and Welsh arrows did the early cutting, sowing panic into shoulders. But the real horror arrived when the armored mass bogged and toppled, each man tripping the man who trusted him to stand. There, in knee-deep drag, the warhammer made its sermon. A fallen knight cannot roll nimbly. His joints are gears designed for angles he no longer has. English billmen and hammermen stepped in, with short, ugly swings. Helmets dimpled, visors stuck half shut, breastplates sang and then groaned. The harness that promised deliverance became a trap, with buckles. You didn't need to pierce to kill. You needed to interrupt breath, balance, blood flow, the choreography of a spine. Chroniclers talk about mercy running thin once the crush began, but the physics had already done most of the decision-making. Mud stole leverage from the elite and gifted it to men who could simply stand and swing. The warhammer's democracy was not a metaphor, it was the flattening of a technological hierarchy by terrain, timing, and a head the size of your fist. Unlike a sword, which demands years of footwork, edge alignment, and distance, a hammer asks for fundamentals, stance, timing, and the humility to hit with the head rather than your feelings. That accessibility made it a class breaker. A strong yeoman who'd swung timber all winter could, with a few weeks of drill, become a problem even an earl had to solve with more than a crest. It also broke illusions. Plate was expensive not merely in coin, but in confidence. It bought the belief that training and treasure insulated you. A hammer insisted on a brutal equivalence. Everyone's skull is made of the same math. On mixed battlefields, levies beside household men-at-arms, this mattered. If your front rank could threaten the best enemy in harness, your second rank could breathe, and your third might hold. There was a reason city militias stocked poles and hammers. They purchased competence fast. You could teach a man not to overswing, to recover the haft along a shield edge, to step off-line before striking. You could not, in a season, make him fence like a saint. The hammer's simplicity was not stupidity, it was focus, a design that stripped combat down to decisions the body already understood from labor and life. If the warhammer is a crisp sentence, the flail is a scream that sometimes rhymes. A wooden haft, a short chain, and a spiked ball look like a child's drawing of weapon. In practice, the physics get baroque. The head lags, then whips, momentum stacks, then snaps. The line of travel bends around obstacles like a bad idea that learned to turn corners. It is unpredictable by design and terrifying even to men who loved it. The flail's selling point is its hinge. That chain decouples the head from the hand, creating a second stage of acceleration that turns modest arm speed into a brutal tip velocity. A shield that defeats a straight-line strike can still be betrayed by the flail's curve. The ball comes late, wraps the rim, and kisses the ear you thought was safe. In tight places, the head searches, slapping along edges until it finds meat. Against cavalry, a rider misjudges range by a foot and learns the difference between wood and iron the hard way. But there's a price. Control. The hinge that breaks defenses also breaks tempo. Miss with a sword and you know where the blade went. Miss with a flail and you may meet your own head a split second later. That's why veterans train the recover more than the strike, catching the chain on the haft. choking the swing short with a forearm, letting the head bite earth instead of bones that pay your rent. Every flail story carries a cousin who swatted himself. The head lags. A friend steps in. Your plan meets his cheek. Or you over-rotate. The chain comes around the edge of your shield, and you teach your nose about entropy. This isn't comedy, it's statistics. In the crush, lines dissolve, targets move, and the head of your weapon has its own ambitious little life. That's why flails lived in the hands of men who accepted risk for glory, for cause, or because a converted farm tool was what they could afford. The learning curve is steep and not entirely forgiving. Judge the length, judge the lag, and above all, judge when to stop. Successful flailmen developed a drummer's discipline, measure inside chaos. They used short pumps for close work and long arcs when space allowed, strangling the chain with the offhand to shorten the leash before the head could wander home. Still, the self-harm reputation stuck because it was earned. Armorers patched as many flail-made dents inside friend lines as outside them. In a way, that danger was part of the aura, a weapon everyone in the room respected, including its owner, especially its owner. Where the flail shines is in negotiations. A straight strike finds a shield and stops. A hinged strike finds the shield and bends. That small change breaks a lot of textbook defenses. A raised heater or round shield that would parry a sword can still deliver your skull to a ball that arrived on a different timetable. In formation fighting, flails reached over the front rank's guard to rattle helmets in the second. Against Pavis's big infantry shields, flails drummed, testing for breaks and attention, forcing men to keep shields welded to faces while your line closed to spear range. Then there's architecture. Castle doorways, palisade gaps, wagon fort openings, places where a man can't commit his whole body favor heads that go where hands can't. A flail can probe around a door jamb and make the man beyond rethink salary and destiny. In alley fights and ladder tops, that mattered. Defenders learned to rope and catch, wrapping a flail's chain with a hooked shaft, wedging the head, pinning it against stone. Attackers learned to stutter swing short, choppy arcs that gave most of the surprise with less of the leash. Tactically, the flail didn't replace anything. It complicated everything. Your shield had to respect a second kind of line. Your stance had to adjust. Even if you hated them, one man with a flail in the enemy front rank turned your drills into improv. A flail's chain works like a poor man's gearbox. Your arm begins the arc. Inertia delays the head. Then the hinge lets stored energy snap into a narrower circle, spiking tip speed at the moment of contact. It's the whip crack principle in metal. Instrumented tests and reconstructions show that, swing for swing, a flail head can deliver significantly more impulse than a rigid club of equal weight, often on the order of a third, again, as much because the last instant of acceleration stacks on top of the original motion. That physics comes with second-order effects. The head, being decoupled, tends to align normal to the surface it strikes, meaning it meets armor more squarely than a misaligned sword edge. Spikes amplify the bite by concentrating pressure into fewer points, turning a glancing contact into a puncture, or at least a committed dent. On mail, the effect is uglier than cuts. Rings deform, rivets pop, padding under mail pancakes, bones beneath ring. For the user, the lesson is honest. The flail rewards patience and timing more than brute force. A smaller fighter who understands the hinge can produce a hit disproportionate to body mass, while a bigger man who tries to muscle it spends half the fight yanking his own comet back into orbit. Few medieval weapons prove as cleanly that good mechanics beat raw brawn. The flail's family tree runs through the barn. Grain threshing, flail's long staff, flexible knuckle, striking swipple already taught rural hands the rhythm of hinged impact. In Crisis, smiths shortened swipples, added iron bands or spikes, and birthed battlefield flails by the dozen. For peasants, that mattered. You could arm a village with the muscle memory it already owned. The Hussites of Bohemia made an art of this. Behind wagon forts bristling with pavises, they fielded mixed formations where pikes broke charges, handguns barked, and flails punished whoever got close enough to think about heroics. Even armored foes learned humility when a spiked head arrived late and sideways through a gap they thought was doctrine-proof. Elsewhere, in risings and city brawls, the flail stood as a symbol as much as a tool. The field turned into a politics lesson you could feel in your teeth. That symbolism stuck. The sword remained the language of titles. The flail became the dialect of people who made bread and, when pressed, broke helmets. And beside both, the warhammer kept whispering the same short sermon. No matter your crest, mass, and leverage, do not bend the knee. We've met two minds of medieval violence, the warhammer's clean, merciless arithmetic and the chain flail's dangerous poetry. One collapsed steel into bone without asking permission. The other curved around certainty and punished men for believing straight lines could save them. Together, they stripped away the illusion that money or manners could outrun physics. We've now climbed to 60 truths, and the pattern is loud. On real battlefields, the winners respected math first. Next episode, we go deep on specialization, the Godendag, cavalry killer of the Low Countries, and the Zweihänder, a 2-meter blade that parted pikes and courage in the same motion. If this tour made your visor feel a little tight, share it. Tell me in the comments. In a fight you didn't choose, would you reach for the warhammer's certainty or the flail's chaos? Tap subscribe and ring the bell so you don't miss part 7. The forge is hot, the halves are oiled, and the next lesson has teeth.